From the Mercy One studio.
Man Up, brought to you by Construction Professionals, a program dedicated to inspiring and helping men live lives of heroic virtue. Join Joe Stopulos every Monday at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. on Iowa Catholic Radio. And now, it's time to Man Up.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. We are broadcasting from the Mercy One studio, heard on 1150 AM, 88.5 FM, and 94.5 FM. Around the globe, streaming on iowacatholicradio.com. Also, check out the podcast on iTunes. Check us out on Facebook. Like us on Facebook. Follow us on Twitter. I am Joe Stopulos. Today's guest is Tim Flattery, and we will be really just reminiscing on the great weekend that we just had with Father John Riccardo, also talking about Advent and Christmas. Kind of a catch-all show, but with Tim Flattery, he also got to have Father John Riccardo, on his podcast, and I really wanted to bring Tim on the show today and discuss all those things. So before we get too far into it, let's start in prayer. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Saint Michael the Archangel, defend us in battle, be our protection against the wickedness and the snares of the devil. May God rebuke him, we humbly pray, and do thou, O Prince of the heavenly host, by the power of God, cast into hell Satan and all the evil spirits who prowl about the world, seeking the ruin of souls. Amen. In the Father, and Son, the Holy Spirit. Amen. So yesterday was Gaudete Sunday. As you've heard me talk throughout Advent here, taking this season seriously. You know, last week we had two feast days, Immaculate Conception and Our Lady of Guadalupe. Friday was St. Lucy. So my family, we celebrate all those things. Well, yesterday was Gaudete Sunday. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the history of why that's important. To me, it really signifies more about Advent as a season and refinding the penitential nature of Advent. So here's a blurb. The season of Advent originated as a fast of 40 days in preparation of Christmas, commencing on the day after the feast of St. Martin. That's why it was often called St. Martin's Lent, a name by which it was known in the early 5th century. In the 9th century, the duration of Advent was reduced to 4 weeks, starting the 4 Sundays before Christmas. Advent preserved most of the characteristics of a penitential season, which made it a kind of counterpoint to Lent. Gaudete Sunday was the counterpoint to Laetare Sunday, which was a similar break about halfway through the season, which otherwise was a penitential in character, and it signifies the nearness of the Lord's coming. So I think that's important. This was that break halfway through because it's a penitential season. Again, I think we lose that in today's society. We don't see Advent as a penitential season. And so Gaudete Sunday loses a little bit of its luster of saying, here's a reprieve from what we've been doing in preparation for the Lord. The spirit of the liturgy all through Advent is one of expectation and preparation for the feast of Christmas, and I think this is important, as well as for the second coming of Christ. So yes, we're preparing our hearts for Christmas, but we're also preparing ourselves for the second coming of Christ. And the penitential exercises suitable to that spirit are thus, on Gaudete Sunday, suspended, as it were, for a while, in order to symbolize the joy and gladness in the promise of redemption. So again, we are on Gaudete Sunday yesterday. We're supposed to be suspending the penitent. So that means if we're suspending something, it means we were supposed to be doing something penitent. We were supposed to be increasing our silence, increasing our fasting and prayer, and we're supposed to be using Gaudete Sunday as a means of celebration. So what does that mean going forward? To me, that means let's hunker down for these next basically week and a half now, and really take these final days of Advent into the Christmas season seriously. And then when we get to Christmas, let's really celebrate it. The octave of Christmas, let's celebrate it with your family. Let's make sure we're every day not just celebrating on the day of Christmas and Christmas Eve, but really taking all that time through the Epiphany to celebrate with our family and turn towards the Lord. So we're going to head to a short break. When we return, we will have Tim Flattery on, and we will be sharing all the great stories from the past weekend with Father John Riccardo.
Thank you, Construction Professionals, for underwriting Man Up. Construction Professionals have been long supporters of Iowa Catholic Radio, and we've seen their work firsthand. It's very impressive. They do remodeling or new construction that is innovative, functional, and designing what you want. cpcustomhomes.com.
Support for Iowa Catholic Radio and John Lee and Eddie in the Morning is provided by Five Sons Naturescapes. Five Sons Naturescapes is a Catholic veteran-owned family company providing premium outdoor landscapes. Extend your living space outdoors with patios, pergolas, fencing, and retaining walls. Outdoor lighting is another way to enjoy your landscaping day and night. Five Sons Naturescapes will spend the time to understand your needs and create your perfect outdoor space. Learn more about Five Sons Naturescapes at fivesonsnaturescapes.com. Thank you to Five Sons Naturescapes for their support of Iowa Catholic Radio. Thank you to Confluence Brewing Company for your support of Iowa Catholic Radio. Confluence Brewing Company, brewed locally and featuring regular, seasonal, and limited release beers available in their tap room and at local stores, bars, and restaurants. Confluence has a beer garden for you, your family, and friends to enjoy. Confluence Brewing Company is located at 1235 Thomas Beck Road off the bike trail south of Grays Lake and online at confluencebrewing.com. Confluence Brewing Company, where good things come together, ingredients, ideas, and friends.
My help comes from you. You're right here pulling me through. You carry my weight.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. I am Joe Stopulos, and today I am joined by my good friend, Tim Flattery. Tim is a colleague of mine at Holmes Murphy. He's also in my men's group, and he's a great Catholic man. He's the podcast host of the Moonlight Graham Show, which will be part of the conversation today. Tim, welcome.
Joe, it is great to be back on the Man Up Show.
Now, is this your first time without Father Zach? Have you been on? No, yeah, you've been on once. We did the Carathon. That was the first episode.
We did the Carathon, and that was the first time without Father Zach, but he's still greatly missed here on the Man Up Show.
He is. Quick Father Zach update. He's doing well. I've been in contact with him. Obviously, a little different lifestyle there in boot camp, but he's going to be getting out of that soon, and eventually he'll be stationed in Louisiana. So keep in your prayers, keep all of our priests in your prayers. With Father Zach, there's your Father Zach update. Maybe I need to make that a regular show occurrence, is the Father Zach update. Tim mentioned, obviously, we're in the Advent season here. Any Advent or Christian tradition or Christmas traditions in your family? Your good, strong Catholic family upbringing?
You know, not as many as we probably should have,
okay.
But the Advent wreath was big.
Okay.
So Advent wreath after Mass on Sunday was always a big deal to light the new candle after Mass while we were having brunch. And so that's something that, even though Tori and I, my wife, we don't have any children right now, but we still, at brunch on Sunday,
you do
like the
Advent wreath. Yep,
Yep.
That's good. That's good. Christmas, is it madness in the Flattery? Big Catholic family out of Fort Dodge. Is it chaos, or what did you guys do?
It was chaos. We always were a Christmas morning presents.
Okay.
And after we would open presents, we would go on a 5-mile run.
That cannot be true.
That's true.
Amazing.
And we would race. And as my brothers and I would get older, like originally my dad would always win the run because, you know, at some point you could never. And then there got to be a point where in middle school or high school and college where it got to be really competitive with my brothers and I. And that was our family tradition.
This is just
your
immediate family.
Our immediate family,
so
yep.
No cousins involved, but your dad said, all right, it's Christmas morning.
So he would always mock us a little bit like, well, I'm going to go get my 5 miles in while you guys sit here and eat cookies and with your presents.
That's so great.
Right? So he's poking at us a little bit. And then it turned into, well, we're not going to let Dad win
So
here.
this is before, did you guys do a brunch that day, or what did you guys do for your meal?
We'd get home, and then we would have, like, my mom would make, like, cinnamon rolls.
So this is before that. Okay,
Yep.
You're not eating a bunch of cinnamon rolls and stuff.
First thing we did in the morning was open presents and then go on a run.
That's so great. That's the most Flattery story I've ever heard in my entire life. So we'll transition now. I know I've loved hearing your family stories because you guys took family so seriously growing up. Sundays were a very big deal. The whole family, all the cousins and everything. I love it. It's a great story. So we had a heck of a weekend, Tim.
Heck of a weekend.
Last weekend, we both had a wonderful opportunity to spend extra time with Father John Riccardo, obviously go to the event. There's a lot of things we got to cover. I'm going to talk about this first because I don't want to get lost in the Father John Riccardo conversation, but the veil removed. You had some insider track on that a little bit, and I'm just curious in your thoughts. When you watched the veil removed project, when you saw it for the first time, just want to get your feedback on what you thought, and then I'll share my own.
Yeah, so I've been involved as a board member of the Veil Removed for a couple of years now, and this was, obviously Chris Magruder's passion for the last 5 years almost. And as a board member, I'm not involved with the filming. I'm not involved with like the selection of the actors that were going to be in the movie. So the whole time I'm thinking, what is this going to look like? And how are they going to portray the Eucharist and the miracle of the Eucharist at Mass in a video without it looking, really cheesy or really corny? I think we've all seen kind of Catholic or Christian videos that look corny and they just don't really connect.
Exactly. Yep.
And when The Veil Removed was premiered at the Father John Riccardo event last Saturday, honestly, I was brought to tears. I was moved to tears, not only because it's something that I've been involved in that I see finally has come to fruition, but I thought it was such a powerful and well done 5-6 minute video. And so, kudos to everybody involved. I think it's just such a great thing.
They're already over 100,000.
Already a weekend, we're 108,000 views.
Right.
It's amazing.
Unbelievable. So my wife and I had the same thought, which was, when you're going in, you got to go all in. That was obviously Chris's goal. By the way, for those of you who don't know what The Veil Removed is, go to theveilremoved.com, I believe, veilremovedproject.com. Just Google search it. It's a 5-minute, 7-minute clip, short movie, but done just very professionally. Obviously, it was a huge project to do it with the goal of showing you what the Mass looks like if you really could see it. You could have the veil removed. So it was a labor of love, and a lot of people put the time into it. And it was a culmination, I think, of the weekend. It was a really great project. So I just encourage our listeners to go out and see that. But that was my thought too. Is that Kristen and I were talking on the way home, and this is something that I would have not just no apprehension of, but actually be excited to share. So oftentimes when you see a video, it's not done well, you might
you put a disclaimer on it.
Hey, check it out. Maybe it might be for you. This is something that I would unabashedly share with anyone.
Right.
Because it was so well done. And I think hopefully will bear great fruit I think it'll just give people an idea if this is actually what's going on at Mass. So yeah, I was excited. I was thrilled the way, especially to have it rolled out in front of 2,000 people as well.
Yeah, what a great time to do that.
Perfect.
Yeah, perfect setting.
It was perfect. So you and I had a unique opportunity. Obviously, Father John Riccardo, that event and also just the event in general. I mentioned this on Lee and Eddie's show. The event went. It was a moment of pride for me with Iowa Catholic Radio to see where the stations come to put on an event like that. I go to a lot of chicken dinners, as do you, Tim, just doing our job. And it was as professional, as good as any I've ever been to. The audio visual was on point. The MC, John, was on point. Everyone was on message. It was a great event. But obviously the keynote was Father John Riccardo. And Father John was here from Tuesday to then that Sunday. And, I got to interview him on John's show, and then John and I had 3 hours to talk with him out here in the lobby before you showed up at 11. So I had a good 4 hours with him. You had another hour with him, and then your show was broadcast on the Moonlight Graham Show. So Tim hosts a weekly, well, mostly weekly podcast called the Moonlight Graham Show, and Father John came on his show to discuss sports and all sorts of things. And I'm just curious on the things you got out of the show, the things that you were the big takeaways you had from Father John, and then maybe some feedback you've heard from other people.
Yeah, so my podcast obviously is not a Catholic-centric podcast. We are a sports podcast centered around the role players and the underdogs in sports, as you all know, because I know
good listeners. Yes, a lot of crossover. There's a lot of crossover.
But I really, especially around Christmas, I thought what a great opportunity to bring Father John Riccardo on to talk about kind of the balance of sports and religion in our lives, because my thought, especially over the last couple of years, has been a lot of people have sports almost replacing religion a little bit. They'll wear their NFL jersey to Mass on Sunday if they're even going to Mass on Sunday. But more likely, little kids' tournaments are replacing the Sunday morning routine of going to church. And so I wanted to kind of talk about some of those topics with Father John. And also I had heard he's just a sports fanatic. His family at one time had owned the Detroit Lions. He's a great golfer. He plays basketball still to this day at 54 years old. He's a great runner. And so I wanted to talk sports with a guy like him. And it was an incredible conversation. I was blown away by how much of a sports fanatic he is.
It's unbelievable.
I mean, he's a sports junkie.
To your point, I knew he was a sports junkie. I've listened to him. Obviously, I've listened to every major talk he's given for the last decade. But on your show, you cited, his knowledge of obscure stats.
He was pulling out baseball stats from the 1890s, from the Cleveland Spiders. He was pulling out batting averages from the 1940s.
He ripped off that New York Yankees murderers row in one breath.
Yeah.
The whole starting lineup.
1927 New York Yankees. He knew the entire lineup 1 through 8 in order. And so he was a sports junkie. And I think the feedback that I got from people, because obviously not everybody that subscribes to my show is Catholic.
Or Christian at all.
Christian. And yet it's probably one of the top 2 or 3 episodes that we've had the most feedback from, even 4 or 5 days into it already. And I've heard from folks that I didn't even know were Christian or practicing Catholics. And they talk about how Father John described the communion of saints, how Father John described, the best advice he could give or has ever received is surrender to Jesus. And so not only is he a sports junkie, just like you and I, Joe, but at the same time, I think the biggest thing that came through was his priorities are clearly in line. Mm-hmm. And having a Christ-centric life is very black and white for him, no matter how important sports are.
Yeah. So one of the things I'll encourage all of our listeners right now, go to the Moonlight Graham Show, go to wherever you get podcasts, look it up, listen to the episode, and then I would just encourage you to share it. Share it with friends of yours who maybe are sports junkies, people who love sports, and maybe be open to the faith, maybe be open to diving a little deeper into the faith. Father John will do that. Father John, obviously anyone who listens to my show knows that he's just been probably the biggest inspiration in my spiritual life for sure. He wants Christians. He wants people to evangelize by being normal. He said that's one of the things we need to do is to have people who are attractive Christians, not like attractive physically, but attractive spiritually, attractive emotionally. People who are the guys at the gym. The reason he became Catholic, the reason he really got on fire for Catholic, is he was playing basketball, and some guys who were playing basketball with him, he broke his finger, and the guy just asked, "Hey, can I pray over that? Can I pray over your finger?" And he goes, well, by the end of it actually healed that day, so that was a miracle in and of itself. But to see guys who are living their faith authentically while being fun, while going to the gym, playing hoops, getting a sweat in, all those things, but being men of God, being men of Christ, and finding that balance. So I think your show just epitomized that of Father John.
Yeah, he had a great point of how Jesus is ultimately the greatest athlete that has ever lived, and he goes on this great way of describing it. But then at the end of kind of that story, he said, but at the end of the day, guys just need to sweat for an hour every day. And I'm like, that's exactly right. And I love how he connected sports, like you were saying, playing basketball with those guys, because sometimes, and I think that's what really is appealing about Father John Riccardo, is he's a guy's guy, and he's charismatic. He's a great speaker. He's a very holy man, but his story and the way he tells it is something that all men can connect with, and all men and women, not just, but for guys like you and I, that's, I see a lot of guys that I know in John Riccardo.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that, because my wife, during his talk on Saturday night, he kept saying, well, this will be addressed to the guys, this will be addressed to the guys. And while it may have seemed to us like, well, he really tailored that to the guys, my wife's like, I felt like he was talking to me. Like, he has that ability to do that. And I think your show is just a really great tool of evangelization. Another just thing we can give to people who otherwise wouldn't listen to a Catholic priest talk for 40 minutes. But your show would be a perfect example of, hey, just listen to this guy talk about sports. It's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, and he sounds just like you and any other sports fan. Yeah. I was just checking my phone to get some feedback from a guy who listens to my show, and one of the guys wrote in yesterday, and he just said, I love that Father John uses the word hate when he's describing teams that he doesn't like. Like he said, I hate Notre Dame. I hate the Detroit Tigers. And obviously he doesn't hate them in a way that, in a biblical sense. But that's how sports fans talk. And I thought it was refreshing to hear a priest talk that way,
funny.
too.
So I got a buddy of mine who listens to your show. He goes, hey, Father John doesn't like Notre Dame. And he's a big Notre Dame fan. He goes, what? Why doesn't he like Notre Dame? I called him out on that when we were off air. And I said, Father John, I go, listen, I get your Notre Dame. Obviously, you're a Michigan fan. That makes sense.
But touchdown Jesus.
I know. I said, but my grandparents went there. My parents, my mom went there. My cousins. I got like probably 20 plus family members from Notre Dame. He goes, Joe, almost every person I've ever met who went to Notre Dame is a wonderful human being. I can say that almost the exact opposite of everyone I know who goes to Michigan. But I still cheer for Michigan. It's a great line.
And that's the beauty of fandom right there.
Oh, yeah, exactly. So, again, check out the show. I'm going to segue over because I have some takeaways I want to talk about from his talk. Obviously, you were there. What were your what was maybe the overarching messages that you got or what you took away from the talk on Saturday night?
Yeah, there was a moment during the talk where he had asked for a show of hands, and he was asking it rhetorically, so nobody actually showed their hands. But the question was, raise your hand if you have given yourself completely up to the Lord, like completely, unabashedly up to the Lord. And at that point, it really made me reflect, have I given up everything to God? And for me, the answer is no. Yeah. And I think that was and he got to that point, like, I don't want to see anybody's hands, but because there probably wouldn't be a hand up here.
You know the answer.
Everybody knows the answer if you're being honest. And that's something that over the last week I've thought about more and more. And you mentioned it as we're preparing for Christmas here in the season of Advent. That's something I'm working on. Yeah. Especially as we get ready for Christmas.
Yeah, that was obviously a major point early on. I remember that. I think that his approach, and I've heard him give this. It's just funny. I've heard him give this talk a bunch because I stalk him. I think he got that message pretty loud and clear. So I did a video on this about 5 years. I'm like, yeah, I watched it. Like I know, I saw the video. But he simplifies it all so well. But he talked about created, the story, the kerygma of created, captured, rescued, and response, and how we were created. We were captured by sin, the original sin. Jesus came on a rescue mission, and then what is our response to that? And he talked a lot. Obviously, this talk was about the rescue part of it. I love his war analogies. I absolutely love his war analogies about how, the one on D-Day. If you get the news on D-Day that the Allies have come, and you're in France, and that happens, you're not just taking that news as, oh, good, I'm glad to hear that. What's in the sports section? That's right. It. That's everything. That's all that matters. And you would rejoice, rightfully so, and that's what we should be doing at Christmas. We should be rejoicing because the Savior has come to defeat death. And furthermore, I love the analogy of when D-Day happened, the war was over. Now the war didn't actually end for another year, but it was over because that's the time we're living in. We're living in that time right now between when the war was won and when it actually ended. And so Jesus already won. It's over. We are now living in that time before he comes back again. That's what we're celebrating during Advent. Again, his ability to tailor all this stuff is incredible. But that was, to me, and then what is our response to that? The news has been, he's come, he's won it. What do we do? And so that's what I've been reflecting on a lot this last week.
Oh, absolutely. And going back to that night, too, just to have over 2,000 Catholics in one place on a Saturday night, and it's very powerful because a lot of times, the 2 or 3 masses every Sunday, so not every mass is full, and you don't really, you're not always able to connect with the whole Catholic community in your area. And we were able to do that, especially with all the priests. I mean, how many priests were there, Joe? There might have been 20, 30 priests there. The bishop was there. Holy men like John Leonetti were there. I mean, it was a heck of a night.
It was awesome. Bishop Joensen was obviously there. And one of the things, I spent 3 hours with him, not counting the hour on the air, but 3 hours with him. And
he was ready to get rid of you.
I was so ready to get rid of me. I think I set a date with him in July at his office, by the way. That might have happened. So the one of the coolest things was, and he was very excited about this. And I asked Mary, one of the gal who came with him, kind of, I'm like, off the record, like, does he always say this about every diocese he goes to? She goes, no, he doesn't. He truly believes that Bishop Joensen is a special, special person who will do what's necessary to make the changes necessary to make this a great diocese. Because you guys have a very fertile soil. You have a lot of people on fire for the faith. You have a lot of the necessary prerequisites for being an on-fire diocese. He goes, and the bishop you just got, he never met Bishop Joensen before. He doesn't know him from Adam. But I think he saw in him a lot of those characteristics that would be needed to lead people to that next level. And so I'm just, I'm obviously really excited about that for our diocese. And quite frankly, to hear it come from John Riccardo and his team is just, it's awesome.
And to that point, too, I mean, you think about outside of Father John Riccardo that Saturday night, you also had Iowa Catholic Radio celebration, which is amazing, the progress over incredible. The last 20 years.
Yep.
Ut Fidem, what they're doing here with young people, small groups, the veil removed, and then Father John Riccardo all in one night.
One night.
I mean, it was just a really, really special holy night.
And Bishop Joensen's prayer. I mean, all these things were on top of each other. I agree with you. It was one of the most fun nights I can remember.
Yeah, I mean, I was crying at certain parts of the night, and then I was smiling for the rest of the night.
It was, and I don't like giving Leonetti too much credit. He was on point.
Leonetti was great.
He was on point.
That was the best version of Leonetti I've ever seen.
It's the best version of John Leonetti. Tim, any final thoughts before we go? I could talk about John Riccardo again. I would just encourage people to go to your, what's the website?
It's moonlightgrahamshow.com.
Okay.
Check out the interview that we did with Father John Riccardo. He's phenomenal in it. But also, like, in preparation for interviewing Father John Riccardo, I went back through all of his old speeches that I know, Joe, you've probably went through. Yep. And I traveled for work last week, and I had a bunch of flight time, and I probably listened to 4 or 5 hours of Father John Riccardo. And he's worth it. He's such a special, special man, a special priest, and we're lucky to have him here in the Catholic Church.
One final note on that: pray for him. pray for his ministry. If it's going to be as great as it seems, the devil's going to come after him, and he needs prayer. So, Tim, my thanks again for joining me today. Stick around. We're going to head to a short break, and we'll be right back.
Vitae Family Care is part of the Iowa Catholic Radio family. Pro-life physician Greg McKernan, a DO, has practiced for 27 years, seeing patients of all ages with just about every kind of need. Dr. McKernan lives his faith as a physician and is trained in naprotechnology, allowing him to diagnose and treat many female conditions and even markedly reduce the occurrence of a miscarriage. VitaeFamilyCare.com. Remember, Vitae is Latin for life.
Why do folks give to the Catholic Tuition Organization? Probably because they love Catholic schools, right? Well, partially, but they also like the tax benefits, or they were helped when their kids were in school, or they have been blessed and want to bless others. Whatever the reason, the 65% tax credits are great, and after all, it's for the kids and their future. Online, ctoiowa.org.
My help comes from you. You're right here pulling me through. You carry my weak.
Welcome back to Man Up on Iowa Catholic Radio. My thanks again to Mr. Tim Flattery for joining me for this episode. A few final thoughts on the John Riccardo time here. You know, one of the interesting things that I think is so special about what they're doing, anyone in business, if you're really into business books, you probably know the name Patrick Lencioni. Patrick Lencioni is just one of the foremost experts on teams, on business teams, on developing great teams. He's also a Catholic. I've heard him do keynote speeches at business events I've been at. Again, one of the most sought-after business minds out there, and he happens to be a friend of Father John Riccardo's. He happens to serve on the board of Acts 29, which is the organization that he's founded. He is surrounding himself with these really great minds and trying to help basically change parish life, to reinvigorate parishes in the same structure as Patrick has come up with for businesses and how to make a business run well, how to make a great business team. We're trying to bring that into the parish life. And so I'm just really excited about their ministry. I think it's going to be do wonders around the country. Hopefully we can get them here in Des Moines as well. But so pray for Father John. Pray for their ministry. Go to acts29.com. It's Acts, and then it's XXIX. .org or .com, not sure which one. But go check out what they're doing. Support their ministry however you can. And again, my thanks to Tim Flattery. Go to moonlightgrahamshow.com. Check out their podcast. Again, I think it's a great evangelization tool to share with somebody who might otherwise, who would love sports, but maybe doesn't, wouldn't listen to a Catholic podcast. They would definitely get something out of this. So my thanks again for joining me on Iowa Catholic Radio. I am Joe Stopulos. It's time to man up.
Man Up, inspiring men to live out their call to holiness with Joe Stopulos. Heard Mondays at 9 a.m. and 9 p.m. on Iowa Catholic Radio. Brought to you by Construction Professionals.